Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In today's video, I'm going to be working out the practice problems from the Arithmetic Reasoning Subtest of the 11th practice test on my website. If this is your first time finding my YouTube channel, I want to mention that I have a small website called ASVABapp.com. There, in addition to taking 11 full-length practice tests, you can also download a free copy of my 13-page reference sheet. If for some reason you don't want to go to my website to take this practice test, you're more than welcome to work out these problems alongside me here on YouTube. In that case, I'd recommend that you pause the video after I read each question, attempt to work out the question on your own, and then resume playing the video to check your solution. As a reminder, you're not permitted to use a calculator or a reference sheet on the actual ASVAB. And so regardless of where you take this practice test, it's in your best interest not to use either of those resources. Finally, I want to say that in the description of this video, there are going to be timestamps associated with each question. Next to the timestamp is going to be the topic that the question's testing, as well as a link to a video in which I discuss that topic in greater detail. So if at any point during this video you feel as if you need more help, just look in the description and there you'll find links to additional resources. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's video. Number 1 says 2 cars started at the same place and traveled along the same route. The first car traveled at an average speed of 40 miles per hour, while the second car traveled at an average speed of 55 miles per hour. After 5 hours, how many more miles did the second car travel than the first car? All right, so at first glance, this problem seems pretty challenging, and it is. That said, I'm a little bit of a visual learner, and I think once you see what's happening in this problem visually, it actually becomes very, very easy. All right, so according to the problem, we have 2 cars starting at the same point. So this dot is going to be car 1, and this dot's going to be car 2, and I'll put C1 here and C2 here. They travel along the same route, so they're going in the same direction. But that said, car 2 goes at a faster rate. More specifically, it travels at 55 miles per hour, whereas car 1 travels at a slower rate. More specifically, it only goes 40 miles per hour. So clearly, car 2 is going to travel a farther distance than car 1. Question is, how would we figure that out mathematically? And in this case, we have all the elements of the distance formula. Again, the distance formula describes the relationship between distance, rate, and time. More specifically, it says distance is equal to rate times time. All right. Well, for car 1 and car 2, we have a rate, 40 miles per hour for car 1, that's RR, and 55 miles per hour for car 2. What's more, we have a time. We're told that they both traveled for 5 hours. So again, distance is equal to rate times time. So this would be 40 times 5 hours, and we would figure out what its distance is. And this would be 55 times 5 hours. And that would give us our distance. So in this case, to figure out how much farther car 2 traveled than car 1, it would be 55 times 5. That's the distance car 2 traveled, minus 40 times 5. That's the distance car 1 traveled. And as we can see, this is answer choice A. Okay, so if you haven't been to my website, I want to mention this. I have a 13-page reference sheet that includes all the formulas you need to learn and memorize for the ASVAB. And as it happens, D equals RT, distance equals rate times time, is on there. In fact, I think it's on the first page. So make sure you understand how to solve problems involving distance, rate, and time. In this case, all we had to do was set the problem up algebraically, and then we were done. In other cases, you may have to solve this, but either way, you have to know this relationship between distance, rate, and time. All right, so that's that one. Pretty good question there. Number 2 says, if a carpenter glued one piece of wood that is 6 over 16 inches thick to another piece of wood that is 7 over 8 inches thick, then what is the total thickness of the two pieces he glued together? All right, so it should be pretty obvious that we're just going to be adding these two fractions together. Notably, we're going to be adding 6 over 16 to 7 over 8. And if you haven't worked with fractions in a while, let me say this. In order to add fractions, your denominators have to be the same. In this case, we have a denominator of 16 and a denominator of 8. So we're going to have to either rewrite one or both of these fractions such that they have a common or the same denominator. Well, as it happens, you should recognize that 8 and 16 have a common denominator of 16. And 6 over 16 already has a denominator of 16, so we're just going to copy that one down as is. In order to write 8 as 16, however, we're going to have to multiply it by 2, and we're also going to have to do that to its numerator. 8 times 2 is 16. 7 times 2 is 14. All right, so this is 6 over 16 plus 14 over 16, which looks like this when we add them together. 6 plus 14, which is 6 plus 14 is 20 over 16. All right, so at this point, you're probably saying to yourself, well, that's not one of the answer choices. Did I make a mistake? Or is there something I can do to write 20 over 16 as one of our answer choices? And as it happens, 20 over 16 is what's called an improper fraction, meaning the value of its numerator is bigger than the value of its denominator. 20, of course, is bigger than 16. So we can actually write this improper fraction as a mixed number. Before doing that, however, what you want to do is reduce this improper fraction as much as you can. And you should notice that 20 and 16 have a common factor of 4. So we can reduce this by dividing 20 and 16 by 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. 16 divided by 4 is going to be 4. So this is 5 over 4. And now we're going to take this improper fraction and convert it to a mixed number. And the way you do that is like this. You read this as long division. That is, you read this as 5 divided by 4. So 5 divided by 4. And we ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 5 without going over? Of course, that's 1 time. 1 times 4 is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. So right now, we actually have enough to write this improper fraction as a mixed number. Again, this 1 is going to be our whole value. This remainder of 1 is going to be our numerator. And this 4 is going to be our denominator. So that is 1 inch, 1 1/4 inches, which is answer choice A. All right, so that's that one. Again, you do have to understand how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions to be successful on the ASVAB. And this problem was a test of your ability to do those things, including a test of your ability to convert an improper fraction to a mixed number. All right, so that's that one. Number 3 says, in a group, the ratio of doctors to lawyers is 5 to 4. If the total number of people in the group is 72, what is the number of lawyers in the group? All right, so we know the ratio of doctors to lawyers is 5 to 4. But what does this ratio really mean? Well, this ratio to me means this. Every 4 out of 9 people that you meet in this group will be a lawyer. Okay? And to find out the total number of lawyers in this group, we'll take 4/9 and we'll multiply it by 72. And as it happens, this math is pretty easy to do. Again, we could write 72 as a fraction by placing it over 1, which enables us to simplify this like this. We can say 9 goes into 9 1 time, 9 goes into 72 8 times. So as you can see, this becomes 4 over 1 times 8 over 1. Again, 4 over 1 is just 4. Anything over 1 is just itself. 8 over 1, likewise, is just 8. So this is 4 times 8. 4 times 8 is 32. So in this group of 72 people, 32 of them are lawyers, and that's answer choice B. All right, so that's that one. Kind of a challenging problem, but not too difficult if you think your way through it. Number 4 says, if a carpenter cut 3 4-feet and 6-inch boards from a 14-foot board, then how long was the piece of wood that was left over? All right, so the first thing we have to figure out is how many feet and inches these 3 4-feet and 6-inch boards are. So we're going to have to take 4 feet and 6 inches, and we're going to have to multiply that by 3. All right, and that's pretty easy to do. Again, 3 times 4 is 12, so that's 12 feet. And then 3 times 6 is 18, so that's 18 inches. In other words, the length of these 3 boards is 12 feet and 18 inches. That said, we can't leave this as 18 inches, and here's why. 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. So, in reality, this 18 inches is 1 foot, and what's 18 minus 12? 6 inches. All right, so we can add our foot here. This becomes 13 feet and 6 inches. All right, that's the total length of the 3 boards that this carpenter cut. And the question is this: how are we going to subtract that from this 14-foot board? Well, I can actually write this 14-foot board in terms of feet and inches as well. Again, we're dealing with a 14-foot board. How can I write that as feet and inches? I can write that as 13 feet and 12 inches. Again, 12 inches is 1 foot. 1 foot plus 13 feet is 14 feet, right? So in reality, all we're doing in this problem is taking 13 feet and 12 inches, and from that we're subtracting 13 feet and 6 inches. And that math's actually pretty easy to do. 13 feet minus 13 feet is no feet. 12 inches minus 6 inches is just 6 inches. So the answer to this one is A, 6 inches. In other words, after cutting these 3 boards from a 14-foot board, he'll have a piece of wood that's 6 inches left over. All right, so that's that one. Again, you have to know some very basic conversions for the ASVAB, such as the fact that there are 12 inches in every foot. Number 5 says, if a bird flies at a rate of 2/3 of a mile per minute, then at how many miles per hour is it flying? All right, so it should be pretty obvious that we're converting from a rate that's in terms of miles per minute to be in terms of miles per hour. And the question is, how are we going to do that? Well, let's first note that this bird is flying 2/3 of a mile every minute. Well, let's convert this to be in terms of miles per hour. We're going to have to multiply it by this. Again, there are 60 minutes in every 1 hour. And by doing this math right here, we will make our conversion. And you should see that we can actually cross out this minutes unit. Again, it's here and here, so we're going to cross it out here and here. And if you look closely enough, you'll see that we're only left with miles over hours, which is exactly what we want. So let's do this math. We have 2 times 60, which is 120, over 3 times 1, which is just 3. And as far as units go, we're only left with miles over hours, or miles per hour. So let's work this out. 12 divided by 3 would be 4, and just drop down that 0. So 120 divided by 3 is 40, and this is miles per hour. So 2/3 of a mile per minute is the same thing as 40 miles per hour, which is answer choice C. Kind of a difficult problem, but now that you've seen it, you can see that the math is actually pretty easy. All right, so that's that one. Number 6 says a man can walk 36 miles in 12 hours, while he can cover the same distance on a bicycle at twice the rate of speed. At this rate, how many miles would he cover on a bicycle in 9 hours? All right, so it should be obvious that this problem has all the elements of the distance formula. Again, as we've seen in this video already, the distance formula describes the relationship between distance, rate, and time. Specifically, it says distance is equal to rate times time. And as it happens, if you know at least two of these variables, you can find the third one. So if you have R and T, you can find D. If you have D and T, you can find R. And if you have D and R, you can find T. Well, let's take a look at this problem. It says a man can walk 36 miles in 12 hours. Well, 36 miles is a measure of distance. So I know 36 miles is going to be a D, and 12 hours is a measure of time. So I know that's going to be a T. While he can cover the same distance on a bicycle at twice the rate of speed. So what that says is you have to figure out what R is. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Again, we're working with the distance formula. Distance is equal to rate times time. In this case, we know he can walk 36 miles, which is D, in 12 hours, which is T. So that's going to be R times 12. All right, so let's divide both sides by 12 now to get R by itself. This crosses out here, leaving you with just R on this side. 36 divided by 12. Well, 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. So 36 divided by 12 is 3. So R in this case is 3. Now this R refers to the rate of speed that he can walk this 36 miles. And we're told that on a bicycle, he can go at twice the rate of speed. So what is twice of 3 miles per hour? Well, that's going to be 2R, and we know R is 3, so this would be 2 times 3, 6. So on a bicycle, he can go 6 miles per hour. All right, so we know his rate of speed on a bicycle. And the final part of this question says, how many miles, that's distance, would he cover on a bicycle in 9 hours? And that's T, and it says at this rate. Well, we know what his rate is. It's right here. It's 6 miles per hour. So again, we're going to have to use another iteration of the distance formula. Distance equals rate times time. In this case, we're solving for D. How many miles? That's unknown, so we'll leave that as D. His rate is 6 miles per hour, so we'll plug in 6 for R. And the time, according to the problem, is 9 hours. So this is 6 times 9. And 6 times 9 is going to be 54. All right, so the answer to this one is A, 54 miles. And just to walk you through it mentally, again, we were given the rate of speed that he can walk 36 miles. We had to double that to figure out how fast he can ride his bicycle. And then we had to figure out, given how fast he can ride his bicycle, how many miles will he cover in 9 hours. So we had to use 2 iterations of the distance formula to ultimately figure this one out. But that said, none of the math was too difficult. So hopefully you followed along there, but that's that one. Number 7 says, out of 20 attempts, a basketball player scored 8 times. What percent of his shots did he make? All right, so he made 8 out of 20 shots. And we have to figure out a way to convert this fraction to be in terms of a percent. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this fraction to be a decimal. And the way you do that is by performing long division. All right, and prior to doing this long division, we can actually simplify this fraction. Again, you should recognize that both 8 and 20 have a common factor of 4. which means we can divide both of them by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 20 divided by 4 is 5. All right. Now, to convert this fraction into a decimal, we're actually going to read this as 2 divided by 5. All right. And we start by asking ourselves this: how many times does 5 go into 2? It doesn't. So what I have to do is add a decimal here and a 0 here. Once I add that decimal, I have to bring it up right here. And what's more, remember I said 5 does not go into 2. So I have to add a 0 here to indicate that 5 did not go into 2. Since I accounted for the decimal up here, what I'm going to do is treat this as 20, not 2.0. Again, the decimal's up here. This is 20. And now the question is, how many times does 5 go into 20 without going over? That's going to be 4 times, given that 5 times 4 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. So 2/5 in decimal form is 0.4. And to convert that into a percent, we just multiply by 100. Whenever you multiply something by a power of 10, such as 10, 100, 1000, 10,000, and so on, all you do is take that decimal and shift it to the right according to how many zeros there are in that power of 10. Well, in 100, there are 2 zeros. So this would be 0.4 times 100. There are 2 zeros in 100. So we're going to take this decimal and shift it 2 times. Add a 0 placeholder and tack on our percent sign so we can see that that is 40%. In other words, if he makes 8 over 20 shots, that's the same thing as 40%, which is D. All right, so that's that one. Number 8 says a class of 25 students took a science test. 10 students had an average score of 80, while the rest of the students had an average score of 60. What was the average of the whole class? All right, so to find the average of the whole class, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take those 10 students who scored an 80. We're going to multiply that together, 10 times 80. And to that, we're going to add the number of students who got a 60. Well, in this problem, that's not that clear. It says while the rest of the students had an average score of 60. Well, if there's 25 students in a class and 10 scored a 80, that means 15 got a 60. So that's going to be 15 times 60. And we're going to divide that by the total number of students who took this test, which is 25. All right, so by figuring out this arithmetic here, we'll know what the average score of the whole class was. 10 times 80 is actually pretty easy to do mentally. That's 800 plus 15 times 60. So as not to make a mistake, I'm actually going to work that off to the side. We have 60 times 15. 0 times 5 is 0. 6 times 5 is 30. Before we start multiplication with this 1, we have to bring in a 0. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 6 is 6. 300 plus 600 is 900. So this becomes 800 plus 900 over 25. All right. 800 plus 900 is going to be 1700. Of course, this is over 25. And here's where it's in your best interest to use some mental math to solve this one. What you could do is you could say 100 divided by 25 is 4. Therefore, 1700 divided by 25 is the same thing as 17 times 4. Well, 7 times 4 is 28, so drop down an 8, carry a 2. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 2 is 6. So 1700 over 25 is 68. Now, if for some reason you're not confident in your ability to do this math mentally, you can do this as well. You can read this as 1700 divided by 25. And you start by asking yourself, how many times does 25 go into 1? It doesn't. How many times does 25 go into 17? Doesn't. How many times does 25 go into 170 without going over? Well, let's think about that. 25 times 4 is 100, times 5 is 125, times 6 is 150, times 7 is 175. So this is going to be 6. Again, 25 times 6 is 150. 170 minus 150 is 20. Drop down this 0. 25 goes into 200. 8 times 25 times 8 is 200 with no remainder. All right, so whether you solve this one mentally or you did the long division, you get the same answer of 68 for the class average. And as you can see, that is answer choice A. All right, number 9 says, if 12 men are needed to run 4 machines, how many men are needed to run 20 machines? All right, so for this one, we can actually use a proportion to solve it. And again, a proportion is nothing more than two fractions that are equal to each other. And the key to setting up your proportion is this. You want your units to be the same on both sides of the proportion. So if I put men in the numerator over here, I better have men in the numerator over here. And let's see what that looks like. Again, on the left-hand side of the equal sign, you typically want to put the information that's given. And on the right-hand side of the equal sign, you typically want to put the information that's missing. Well, here's what's given. It takes 12 men to run 4 machines. So that's 12 men to run 4 machines. Okay? How many men are needed? Well, how many, that's an unknown value. So we're going to call that X men. And we're going to put that in the numerator. So that's X men are needed to run 20 machines. And again, you can see I have men in the numerators and machines in the denominators. Now that we set up this proportion correctly, all we have to do is cross multiplication. So I'm going to do 4 times x, which is 4x, equals 20 times 12. And at this point, we're solving for x. So we can go ahead and divide both sides by 4. This crosses out here, leaving you with just x. And let's talk about how we can simplify this without having to do a lot of work. Well, you can actually do it like this. You can say 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 25 times. So this becomes 5 times 12 over 1. 5 times 12 is 60 over 1. Anything over 1 is just itself, so 60 over 1 is just 60. So to answer this question, it would take C, 60 men to run 20 machines if it takes 12 men to run 4 machines. All right, so that's that one. Number 10 says, in an auditorium during an assembly, 1/6 of the students are 5th graders, 1/3 are 4th graders, 1/4 are 3rd graders, and the rest of the students are 2nd graders. If there are 96 students in the auditorium, how many 2nd graders are there? All right, so this problem's a little bit tricky in as much as it tells you what fraction of the students are in 5th, 4th, and 3rd grade, but right here it just says the rest of the students are 2nd graders. So we're going to have to do some work to figure out what fraction of the students in the assembly are in 2nd grade. And here's how we're going to do that. Again, I'm going to use this 1 to represent the total number of students in the assembly. And from that, I'm going to subtract 1/6. And my pen's starting to act up on me here. Just bear with me. 1 minus 1/6. Again, there are 1/6 of the students in 5th grade minus 1/3. That's the number of students in 4th grade minus 1/4. That's the number of 3rd graders. And by working this out, I'll figure out what fraction of the students are 2nd graders. So let's go ahead and work on solving this. First things first, we have to understand that in order to subtract fractions, our denominators have to be the same. In this case, we have a denominator of 6, 3, and 4. And this is a whole number of 1, so it doesn't have a denominator. The very first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this 1 as a fraction by placing it over 1. So this is 1 over 1 minus 1 over 6 minus 1 over 3 minus 1 over 4. And our next step is to rewrite all these fractions such that they have the same or a common denominator. Well, what's a number that 1, 6, 3, and 4 all go into? 12. So we're going to rewrite all these fractions such that they have denominators of 12. And that's going to look like this. All right, to write 1 as 12, I would have to multiply it by 12. I'm also going to have to do that to its numerator. Again, 1 times 12 is 12. 1 times 12 is 12. So we can see that 1 is the same as 1 over 1, which is the same as 12 over 12. Again, 12 divided by 12 is just 1. To write 6 as 12, I would have to multiply it by 2. I'm also going to have to do that to its numerator. 6 times 2 is 12. 1 times 2 is 2. So 1/6 is the same as 2 over 12. To write 3 as 12, I would have to multiply it by 4. I'm also going to have to do that to its numerator. 3 times 4 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4. To write 4 as 12, I'm going to have to multiply it by 3. I'm also going to have to do that to its numerator. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 3 is 3. All right, so now that these fractions all have the same denominators, we can combine them into one big fraction like this. 12 minus 2 minus 4 minus 3. And we can simplify this a little bit more to be this. 2 and 4 is 6. 6 and 3 is 9. So this is 12 minus 9 over 12. Well, what is 12 minus 9? 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's going to be 12 minus 9 are 3 over 12. Well, as it happens, we can also simplify 3 over 12 since 12 and 3 have a common factor of 3. 3 goes into 3 one time. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 1/4 of the students, we can say with confidence now, are in second grade. And now we have to figure out what 1/4 of 96 is. So that's going to be 1/4 times 96. And as you can see, we're multiplying a fraction by a whole number. What we want to do is write this 96 as a fraction by placing it over 1. And then we can just multiply straight across. This becomes 1 times 96. Again, anything times 1 is itself. So 1 times 96 is just 96. And my pen's starting to die on me here. So that's 96 over 4 times 1, which is just 4. All right, so let's go ahead and work this out now. Again, I'm going to read this as long division. So this to me says 96 divided by 4. And I start by asking myself, how many times does 4 go into 9 without going over? And that's going to be 2 times, given that 4 times 2 is 8. 9 minus 8 is 1. Drop down this 6. 4 times 4 is 16 with no remainder. So 96 over 4 is 24. So in other words, 24 of the students in this auditorium during this assembly are in second grade. And that's answer choice A. Number 11 says a soccer field is in the shape of a rectangle and it is 90 meters wide and 120 meters long. During warm-ups, a coach asks his players to jog from one corner to the corner diagonally across the field. How far do the players have to jog? All right, so for this problem, it might be helpful to make a quick sketch. And we know we're going to be working with a rectangle since that's the shape of the soccer field according to the problem. And we have to know some properties of rectangles. Notably, in rectangles, the widths are equal and the lengths are equal. Again, according to the problem, this soccer field has a width of 90 meters, which means this side is 90 and this side is 90. Likewise, we're told it has a length of 120. So we know this length is 120, Therefore, this length is 120. Finally, we were told that the coach asked them to jog from corner to corner. So that means they're going to jog from here to here. And if we draw a straight line to mimic the path they jogged, that looks like this. When you cut a rectangle in half with a straight line, what you create are two right triangles. And we can actually use some information about one of these right triangles to figure out what this distance from corner to corner is. That is to say, we can actually use the Pythagorean theorem to figure out the distance that these players had to jog. And let me pull out one of these right triangles just to show you that. All right, so this is this bottom right triangle. According to the Pythagorean theorem, you can find the length of the hypotenuse by using this formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, where A refers to a leg, B refers to a leg of the right triangle, and C refers to the length of the hypotenuse. Well, how do you identify the length of the hypotenuse? It's always directly across from the right angle. So I know this distance from here to here is C. And if we look, we should see that the length of this hypotenuse is the same distance that these players had to jog. All right. Likewise, again, A and B refer to the legs of the right triangle. So I'm going to let A be 120 and I'm going to let B be 90. All right, let's go ahead and start plugging things in. Again, I let A be 120, so this is 120 squared plus 90 squared equals C squared. Now let's think about this for a second. 120 squared would be a very big number. 90 squared would be a very big number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off these zeros, and I'm going to hold that zero over here. And I'm going to rewrite this like this. 12 squared plus 9 squared equals C squared. And once I work this out, I'm going to tack that 0 back onto my answer. 12 squared, we should know, is 144. 9 squared is 81. This equals C squared. 144 and 81, let's go ahead and add those together. 144 plus 81. 4 plus 1 is 5. 8 plus 4, that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Carry a 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So this is 225 equals C squared. Take the square root of both sides. This crosses out, leaving you with just C on this side. Square root of 225 is 15. That said, we have to tack on our 0 again. So we can see C is 150. All right, so that means the hypotenuse is 150, and we can see the hypotenuse is the same distance that the players had to jog. So we know that is going to be 150 meters, which is answer choice B. You absolutely have to know that when you draw a diagonal across a rectangle, that creates two right triangles, and then you can use the Pythagorean theorem to find the length of that diagonal. So make sure you can do that. That's a very common question on the ASVAB, but the answer to this one is B, 150. Number 12 says, during the holidays, a computer that usually cost $1,250 is on sale for 15% off. What is its sales price? All right, so I'm going to write an algebraic expression to represent what's happening in this problem. Again, we want to know the sales price of this computer, so I'm going to call that SP. And to find the sales price, we're going to take its original price, and from that, we're going to subtract the discount amount times the original price. Well, what is the original price of the computer? It's right here. It's $1,250. And what is the discount amount? Well, that's always going to be our discount amount in decimal form. And we can see that's right here, 15% off. What's the decimal form of 15%? That's 0.15. All right, so all we really have to do is plug those two values in and solve accordingly. Again, sales price is going to be the original price, $12.50, minus the discount amount, that's 15% or 0.15, times the original price, which was $12.50. All right, so let's work this one out. First things first, we have to do $12.50 times 0.15. And as you can see, we're multiplying a whole number by a decimal. So what you want to do is take the decimal in 0.15 and shift it 2 times to the right, such that this problem becomes 1250 times 15 with no decimals. And once we work this out, we'll take our 2 decimals and shift them back into the left. All right, so 0 times 5 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25, carry a 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12, carry a 1. 1 times 5 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Before we start multiplication with this 1, we have to bring in a 0 placeholder. 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1. Let's add these together. 0 plus 0 is 0, 0 plus 5 is 5, 2 plus 5 is 7, 6 plus 2 is 8, and 1 plus nothing is 1. Bring our 2 decimals back in. So we can see that this becomes 1250 minus 187.50. All right, so all we have to do is work this out now. Again, we have 1250 minus 187.50. And some people would get stuck right here. But that said, we can write 1250 in decimal form by adding a decimal and 2 0 placeholders. And now we can actually work this out. 0 minus 0 is 0. 0 minus 5 is going to be, we can't work that out, so we're going to have to borrow to the left. We have a 0 to the left, so we're going to have to come all the way over here to this 5 and borrow one more time. This would be 4. This will be 10. This will be 9, and this will be 10. 10 minus 5 is 5. Drop our decimal down in place. 9 minus 7 is going to be 2. 4 minus 8 we can't do, so we're going to have to borrow. This is going to become 1. This will become 14. 14 minus 8 is 6. 1 minus 1 is nothing, and 1 minus nothing is 1. So our sales price is going to be $1,062.50, which we can see is answer choice C in this case. All right, so that's that one. Again, on my YouTube channel, I have a video in reference to finding tax tips, sales price, double discounts, and original price. So if you struggled with what I did here, go ahead and check that video out. Of course, there's going to be a link to that video in the description of this video, but that's this one. Number 13 says, in 2020, the price for a Mitsubishi Mirage was $10,000. Because of inflation, this is 80% of the price of a Mitsubishi Mirage in 2021. How much does a Mitsubishi Mirage cost in 2021? All right, so for this one, we're going to have to take this problem and convert it into an expression that we can then solve. And as it happens, that's not too difficult to do. We know in 2020, a Mitsubishi Mirage cost $10,000. All right, so we'll start by copying that down. And we're told, according to the problem, this is, well, in math, is always equal. So $10,000 is or is equal to 80%. Again, we're always going to express percents in decimal form. So 80% in decimal form is 0.8. So 10,000 is equal to 0.8 of the price of a Mitsubishi Mirage in 2021. How much does a Mitsubishi Mirage cost in 2021? Well, that's an unknown value. And in math, you typically represent unknown values with letter variables. So I'm going to call the price of a Mitsubishi Mirage in 2021 X. So that makes this 10,000 equals 0.8 times X. And we can actually clean this up to be 10,000 equals 0.8 X. All right. And now we're just solving for X, which means we're going to divide both sides by 0.8. This will cross out here, leaving you with just X on this side. And now we got to work this out. We have 10,000 divided by 0.8. And we're going to work that out via long division. Again, we have 10,000 divided by 0.8. When you're doing long division involving decimals, here's the trick. As long as the decimal's inside this division bracket, you're good to go. If, however, the decimal's outside the division bracket, such as it is in this case, you actually have to shift that decimal to get rid of it. So we have a decimal outside the division bracket in 0.8, so we're going to shift it one time to the right to make 0.88. And at the same time, you have to take the decimal inside the division bracket. Again, in 10,000, the decimal's technically right here. You have to shift it a corresponding number of times to the right. So we're going to have to shift it one time to the right and add a 0 placeholder. So now this becomes 100,000 divided by 8. And let's go ahead and work this out. It's not as difficult to do as it seems at first glance. We start by asking ourselves, how many times does 8 go into 1? It doesn't. How many times does 8 go into 10 without going over? It's 1 time. 8 times 1 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Drop down as 0. Now the question is, how many times does 8 go into 20 without going over? That's going to be 2 times, given that 8 times 2 is 16. 20 minus 16 is 4. Drop down as 0. Now here's the kicker. 8 goes into 40 evenly. We know that. 8 times 5 is 40. So what we want to do to speed up the process here is we want to drop down these 2 other zeros. Because if 8 goes into 40 5 times, that means 8 goes into 4,500 times. 8 times 500 is 4,000, and we can see there's no remainder. So X in this case is going to be 12,500. And in math, it's customary to write the variable for which you solved on the left. So this becomes X equals 12,500, which is answer choice B. All right, so that's that one. Number 14 says Janelle bought a home for $210,000. If she paid 12% as a down payment and financed the rest, then how much was her down payment? All right, so as I've said multiple times in this video, you want to express percents in decimal form, and the decimal form of 12% is 0.12. Now we have to figure out what 12% or 0.12 of $210,000 is. So we're going to do 210,000 times 0.12. All right, the trick to multiplying a whole number by a decimal is this. You want to take your decimal and you want to clear it by shifting it to the right however many times you need to. In this case, we have to shift the decimal in 0.12 2 times to the right such that we can rewrite this problem without a decimal like this. 210,000 times 12. And once we work this problem out without a decimal, we'll take that decimal place that we shifted 2 times to the right here, and we'll shift it 2 times to the left in our answer. So let's go ahead and do this. This is going to be very tedious, but you don't want to rush this because if you do, your answer will not be correct. So I'm going to do this step by step. 2 times 0 is 0. 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 2 times 1 is 2. And 2 times 2 is 4. Before we start multiplication with this 1, we have to bring in a 0. 1 times 0 is 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 0. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. So let's add this all together. 0 plus 0 is 0. 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 2 plus 0 is 2. 4 plus 1 is 5. And 2 plus nothing is 2. Bring our two decimals back in. 1, 2. So we can see that we're left with $25,200. And that is 12% of $210,000, which means her down payment was D, $25,200. All right, so that's that one. Again, we're just working with decimals and percents in this case. Number 15 says, in response to an incident in a local park, a crime scene investigator used caution tape to rope off a square section of the park. If she roped off 289 square feet, how many feet of caution tape did she use? All right, so for this problem, it might be helpful to make a quick sketch. And as it happens, we should realize that we're working with a square section of the park. So we're just working with a square. So let's go ahead and quickly make one of those. And we have to know some properties about squares to answer this one. Notably, we have to know that in squares, all the sides are equal. So this side's equal to this side, that side's equal to that side, and that side's equal to that side. What's more, we also have to know that we typically refer to the lengths of the sides of a square as S. So if this side's S, that means this side's S, and this side's S. And the question is this: we know the area of this square. According to the problem, the area of this square is 289 square feet. How are we going to use information about the area of this square to determine how much caution tape this investigator used? Well, let's think about that. The distance from here to here, which is the caution tape, plus the distance from here to here, plus this distance from here to here, plus this distance from here to here, is the total amount of caution tape that she used. In other words, to find out how much caution tape she used to rope off this section of the park, we're going to be finding the perimeter of this square. And how do you find the perimeter of a square? To find the perimeter of any shape, you simply add up all of its sides. So in other words, the perimeter of this square is going to be S plus S plus S plus S, which we can simplify to be 4S. All right, so clearly we need to figure out what S is in this case. Well, how are we going to do that? To find the area of a square, we always do area equals one of its sides squared. We know what the area of this square is, so I'm going to take this 289 and plug it in for A. This becomes 289 equals S squared. Let's take the square root of both sides to just get S. This crosses out, leaving you with just S on this side. What is the square root of 289? That's 17. So S in this case is 17. Now we can take this S and plug it in right here. So this becomes P equals 4 times 17. Let's go ahead and work that off to the side so as not to make any mistakes here. 17 times 4. 7 times 4 is 28, so drop down an 8, carry a 2. 1 times 4 is 4, plus 2 is 6. So the perimeter of this square is 68 feet, which means that this crime scene investigator had to use 68 feet of caution tape to rope off this square section of this park for her investigation. All right, so the answer to this one is B, 68 feet. You absolutely need to know the relationship between area and perimeter of squares and rectangles for the ASVAB. Those questions show up frequently, so make sure you can work out questions like this one. Number 16 says, at Home Depot, you bought 2 boxes. The first box has a square base. Each side of its base measures 10 units, and it is 4 units high. The second box is rectangular, and it has twice the volume of the square box. If the height of the second box is 5 units and its width is 10 units, then what is the length of the second box? All right, so for this problem, the first thing that should jump out at you is this. The second box has twice the volume of the first box. So in all likelihood, we're going to have to find the volume of each of these boxes. Well, as it happens, boxes are nothing more than rectangular prisms. So the formula to find the volume of a rectangular prism is this. Its volume equals length times width times height. So we'll use this formula to represent the first box, and we'll use another iteration of the formula to represent the second box. Again, that's volume equals length times width times height. All right, so let's start with this first box. We know it has a square base, and each side of the base measures 10 units. That is, the length and width of the base are 10 units. So this is volume equals 10 times 10. And what's more, we know that the height of this first box is 4 units. So this is 10 times 10 times 4. 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 4 is 400. So the volume of this first box is 400 units cubed. Again, volume is always going to be cubed. Area is always going to be squared. All right, so we figured out the volume of this first box. According to the problem, the second box has twice the volume of the first box. So if the volume of the first box is 400, that means the volume of the second box is 400 times 2, or 800. So in place of this V, I'm going to put 800. And again, it says right here, we want to know the length of this second box. So we're going to be solving for L. And we know the height of the second box is, the width of the second box is 10, and the height of the second box is 5. So by solving this expression for L, we'll have solved this problem. So let's go ahead and work on doing that. This is 800 equals L times 10 times 5. Well, 10 times 5 is 50, so this is 50 times L. And to get L by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 50 now. This crosses out, leaving you with just L over here. 800 divided by 50. We can cross out a pair of corresponding zeros. So this becomes 80 over 5. You should be able to do this mentally, because if you think about it this way, 40 divided by 5 would be 8. 40 is twice as, or 80 is twice as big as 40. So 8 times 2 would be 16. So I know the length of this second box has to be 16 units. That said, let's say you couldn't do that mental math here. You could always read this as 80 divided by 5. 5 goes into 8 one time without going over. 5 times 1 is 5. 8 minus 5 is 3. Drop down this 0. 5 times 6 is 30, so there is no remainder. All right, so you could have done 80 over 5 mentally, or you could have worked it out using long division. Regardless, you can see that the answer is L equals 16 units, which is C in this case. Okay, so that's that one. All right, so that is it for today's video. As usual, I hope you found it helpful, and as always, you're more than welcome to leave feedback in the comments section below. If I were taking the ASVAB sometime soon, I would do 2 things to prepare for it. One, I would download a copy of my free reference sheet and work on learning and memorizing those formulas. And 2, I would consider taking all 11 full-length practice tests on my website. If you do both those things, you shouldn't have any issues on test day. And apart from that, I'll say this. If you want to support my channel, all I'm asking is that you become a subscriber. Again, just click that red subscribe button in the right-hand corner under the video. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and cut you loose. Konnichiwa.